Welcome to the Dreamhack US Regional Championship presented by Laughing Dragon. Today's Regional Championship coverage is brought to you by Heavy Play. Welcome back to the floor here at the Regional Championships. There's just over 300 players here competing in 5 more rounds of Modern here today. After those grueling 9 rounds yesterday, we've narrowed it down to those players. The room is absolutely packed in here. We got a ton of side events going on, but everybody's really focused on this regional championship. The top 32 players that finish here today are going to be qualifying for the Pro Tour, and then that top 8 is where it really gets down to business. They're going to be playing for over $130,000, and then whoever makes the finals is going to be qualifying for the World Championships next year. Ton of Magic to be played here today. We've got a great crew of casters to bring all of it to you, so make sure you don't change the channel, because we've got a lot of Magic coming to you right after this.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Dreamhack US Regional Championship presented by Laughing Dragon. My name is Corey Baumeister, and this fine morning we are joined by the 2016 World Champion. It's Brian Braun-Duin. BBD, how are you, and what are you excited for here on day number 2 of competition?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Fine morning indeed. I am excited for, honestly, just more great Magic. You know, we saw a lot of awesome matches yesterday, and I want to see more of that today. I'm really interested to see how the kind of top metagame shakes out, because this tournament was so heavily dominated by Rhinos in terms of percent of the metagame. But I'm curious to see, like, how will that also be the case here in the top rounds of day 2 or no?
Yeah, we're going to see. We're going to be looking at stats a little bit later as well, and it might not be the picture that you expected. But before that, let's talk about the sponsor here of the broadcast here. We have Heavy Play. Today's regional championship is brought to you by Heavy Play. If you want to get some of these awesome products, you can get 10% off with the code Denver24. Really cool stuff. Yeah, magnetic deck boxes and stuff like that. A lot better than the deck boxes we've used in the past, BBD.
Absolutely.
All right, next up, we got the Dreamhack US Regional Championship is presented by Laughing Dragon. Let's check out a little bit of the other upcoming events from Laughing Dragon, BBD.
Yeah, so they have a Magic Experience San Francisco event April 19th through 21st, and also a Magic Experience Tacoma event June 21st through 23rd, which you can see at laughingdragonevents.com.
Yeah, and if they run those events as well as they are running this event here, those have got to be some pretty sweet events. So right now you're lucky enough to hear BBD and I chat with you, but we're not the only ones bringing you coverage here of this fine event. We got Tan and Grace here doing all the interviews and getting all the big reactions from our players, as well as later on in the day, you'll get Niall Rivers and Mason Clark, which will be bringing you those kind of winning in matches. Those are going to be some really exciting ones with those two. And then we have the closers, Riley Knight and Noah Walker, which will be coming in to get this top 8 broadcasted to you. Going to be a really exciting day, but let's check out the schedule, the full schedule of the day, and tell us a little bit about this, BBD.
Yeah, so day 1 was yesterday, 9 rounds of Swiss, and then now we're into day 2, where the broadcast is beginning, of course, now, and we're going to be looking at rounds 10 through 14 to finish off the Swiss, and then a cut to the top 8.
Yeah, absolutely. Going to have a very exciting day, so you're not going to want to move. Now let's check out the structure of this event that we're going to be, exactly what we're going to be seeing today. So we had those 9 rounds of Modern yesterday. We have these 5 rounds, like you were just saying, BBD, today. And then top 8 will be single elimination. Modified play draw, as the higher seed will be going first in those single elimination brackets. Now we got to see what these players are gaming for. And there is a lot of cashola up top there, BBD.
That is a significant amount of the cashola, as you would say. First and second place. First place, $30,000. Second place, $15,000. But also top 2 qualifies for the World Championship, which is the pinnacle of Magic play. And then the prizes continue all the way down to 64th place. And in addition to that, top 32 qualifies for Pro Tour Seattle. Top 48 qualifies for the Regional Championship in Dallas.
Yeah, absolutely. And those top 2 spots, those are what we're going to really be looking at. And getting to the World Championship is a really great feat. And BBD, you've been there before, and you've actually won this in 2016. So getting to the World Championship, it's got to be a really easy event, right? If someone like you could win.
It's really easy when you're there. Getting there is the hard part. So that's the big thing for these players, is you got to get there.
Okay, so if these players get there, they'll have just a cakewalk in the World Championship. I'm sure that's exactly what's going to happen.
I'm sure both of them will find a way to win.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's take a look at the format that these players are playing here. This is Modern, of course. It is a one-on-one, very high-powered format that is non-rotating, and the features set all the way from 8th edition forward. BBD, were you playing in 8th edition, or is that a little too old for you?
Somehow that's too old even for me.
Wow.
It might shock you to hear that. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Fair enough. So this format is ancient. If BBD wasn't playing Magic, you've been playing for a long time there, buddy. So next up, BBD, we have a couple of cards that got the axe here pretty recently. Let's talk about these.
Yeah, Fury and Up the Beanstalk, both recently banned from Modern. Notably, the Rakdos deck, still a viable deck even without Fury, but definitely feels the absence some.
Yeah, definitely makes sense why Yawgmoth is doing a little bit better. We'll be seeing that in a bit. And with Up the Beanstalk, BBD, did you ever have the great joy of cascading into a 2-mana cantrip that made the rest of your draws busted, or were you not playing at that point?
I've had the great joy of cascading into some interesting 2-mana cards before, but not ones that made the rest of my deck great. So no, did not have the pleasure of this card.
Yeah, we'll have to blame Aspiring Spike for getting that one banned, I must say. So, all right, now we're going to shift gears and really get into this tournament here. We have round 10 coming up, but first we're going to look at the metagame here. And now this is the Modern Day 2 metagame. So this is the exact percentages of the conversion. So not, we saw like 20-ish% of Rhinos starting the tournament. Is there any big surprises with these numbers? Any percentages that went up or down, BBD?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a huge surprise, but the one I'm looking at is Golgari Yawgmoth. So a significantly higher amount of Yawgmoth in the Day 2 metagame than there was in the Day 1 metagame, which to me is suggesting that this deck has been one of the best performing decks in the tournament. And even in addition to that, it's a very difficult deck to pilot. So I think a lot of the players who are doing well with this deck, who are really well versed in this deck, can even make the deck better than it would otherwise be.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally 100% agree. We got Teamer Rhinos there. It was at 21%, and then Golgari was at 12.5. So is it pretty normal for the best deck to fall in percentages like that? Or is this like a sign that Rhinos maybe didn't do that well?
I think it's pretty normal. Like one element of the best deck is that it's going to be played by a huge swath of the field. So having the deck overall not perform that well doesn't necessarily mean that some of the players with a better version of the deck or more practice with the deck won't necessarily still be able to do well. So I think Teamer Rhinos certainly not living up to its percentage of play, but that doesn't mean that it won't be heavily represented or even still necessarily be the best deck in the tournament.
Absolutely. And speaking of living up here, we have Living End, which jumped a spot there. Is that surprising to you at all? Because it was Teamer Rhinos, Golgari, Yawgmoth, and then Amulet, followed by Living End. So, Is that wild that Living End is doing that well?
I don't think so. For one, I think Living End has a good Rhinos matchup, and secondly, I think it's just a good deck. Living End was a deck that was really popular in Magic Online when I was preparing for this, and I was really actually impressed with how well it played in a variety of different matchups. So I think it just is a good deck, and I'm not surprised at all that it's been doing well.
Yeah, always a terrifying deck. If they just go, evoke grief, cycle, living end sometime, have those nut draws, it's really hard to beat. One last thing I want to point out is 5-color creativity. The key cards, Arcana Cruelty and Arcana Cruelty. That was just hilarious, I must say.
I think they're missing one card though.
What would that be?
Arcana Cruelty #3.
Ah, touche. Okay, we'll see if we can get the graphics fixed on that one and add another Archon into that for, posterity's sake here. So now let's take a look at the standings of this specific tournament. Now, this is starting to heat up. We have 5 rounds left to go. We have 2 undefeated players here of Mack Endress and Jacob Kosek with 4-color Omnath and Domain Rhinos here. Those are our tournament leaders. But anything besides those 2 stand out to you? Any decks or players or anything?
Yeah, there's a couple things. Number one, we're seeing a lot of Golgari Yawgmoth at 8-1. So kind of to go along with what, including Matt Nass, who we got to watch yesterday. So kind of to go along with the metagame breakdown for day 2, like Yawgmoth is really heavily represented even amongst the better decks that are made it into the second day. And then the other thing I'm noting here is 2 copies of Domain Zoo at 8-1, which, yeah, that's pretty impressive because Domain Zoo wasn't a significantly huge player in the metagame. And, there's been all this talk about Scion of Draco with Leyline in this Rhinos deck. These Domain Zoo players are saying, hey, we're the real Scion of Draco deck.
No kidding. They're the OGs there. I mean, that is pretty wild, right? The top 5 ranked players here. Of course, there's a lot of 8-1s, but top 5 ranked players, there is 12 Scion of Dracos and 12 Leyline of the Guild Packs. John?
I mean, 12 Scion of Dracos for a 12-mana card. It checks out. Math checks out.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that is that's just poetic at that point. So, and then of course we have Matt Nass as our biggest name player for sure. And then I know Sam Pardee as well with that same Golgari Yawgmoth list is at 7-1-1. So some really, really strong players here. So now we are going to kind of shift gears a little bit and get ready for round number 10. But before we get into that, it sounds like we have a pre-match interview with Jacob Kosek before this extremely huge match with Tan and Grace.
Everybody, welcome back here to the RC in Denver, Colorado. I'm Tan and Grace. I'm joined by Jacob Kosek, one of our 9-0 players. We're here at the feature match area. We're getting an interview brought to you by Heavy Play. And look, you went 9-0 day 1. You've got a big matchup here in front of you against the new Rhinos deck. How are you feeling about your deck and your chances against this deck and the rest of this tournament getting into this top 8?
I think it's going to be an interesting matchup. I know that traditionally Rhinos decks we're pretty good just because of how we've oriented the main board, but with that added dimension of the that like guild card and the ley line binding, it's going to be interesting. We were kind of racking our brains how we were going to sideboard against it, but it'll be interesting. It's going to be really fun to see how it performs against it.
Now, speaking of fun, I know that you weren't even qualified for this regional championship when you came here, so you LCQ'd in. This is also your first day 2 ever at a regional championship. Yeah. So you're 9-0, so that's pretty good. And you've also never played a Pro Tour before, and you're only a few wins away from qualifying for your first Pro Tour as well. Are you you've got to be at least a little bit nervous, right? Or is it just you're taking it one match at a time? What's going through your head?
I'm going to shout out my dad. He's probably going to watch this. He learned how to access Twitch for the first time yesterday. Hey, Dad. Every single text after every round, he said the same thing, and it was just breathe, 0-0. That's kind of been our motto. Every match is just you're starting 0-0. Don't even think about what's coming next. And it would obviously be really cool to go to the Pro Tour for the first time. It's a dream, but I want to just take it one match at a time, and just one step at a time.
And one more thing, I want to talk about this one of that got in your deck because I saw it do some pretty insane stuff at that feature match last night, and you're telling me some of the other plays. How good has Cosmic Rebirth been for you?
Oh my gosh, so good. That card is goated. I love Cosmic Rebirth. There's so many instances where you can really catch people off guard. Being able to instant speed get back a Teferi in order to respond to Rhinos, instant speed get back Chalice. There was a play last night in the feature match where instant speed got back a land so that we could hit the 3rd land drop off of Omnath to kill a Grist and then just play out a 1 ring. Card's fantastic. It's great one-of that kind of catches people off guard and surprises you with how good it can be in the situations you find yourself in.
Well, you've been pretty good this weekend so far. 9-0. We're about to start day 2 here, so you got to run over to the feature match area. I'm kind of keeping you away from it. Best of luck the rest of the day.
All right. Thank you so much. Y'all have a good one.
All right, back here in the booth. Gotta love it. Big shout out here to Jacob's dad here. You know, BBD, you know Brad and I's dad, and he would kind of say the same thing. You know, Jacob's dad's always saying you're 0-0 to start this. Brad and I's dad would always say land before creatures, you know, kind of the same thing. You know, he kind of lost his mind when we played Manaless Dredge, but, you know, I won't get into that one, BBD.
I'm a little sad your dad wasn't a lands in front guy, but yeah, a really cool story. Honestly, that was an awesome interview. You know, last chance qualifying to 9-0, just a really cool story. So somebody to pay attention to and root for as this tournament progresses.
Yeah, I absolutely love when you got the parents, you know, supporting your kid as well, even though I'm sure Jacob's dad does not know how to play Magic, you know, but nice to see that support. So getting into this match, here is Jacob Kosek's deck, and 4-color Omnath, BBD. This is not exactly what I would have expected to be 9-0 after day 1, I must say.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I certainly wouldn't have put this as a 9-1 deck. Just on the nature of how these kinds of mid-rangey control decks generally go. You know, usually you're going to run into at least some matchups along the way that are rough for you, or your draws don't line up that well. But I think this is a really interesting list, and I mean that complimentary. There's a lot of cool, like I really actually love how this list is designed, including the 2 Chalice of the Void in the main deck, which is huge in a format of Rhinos.
Yeah, and that is going to be huge in this match as well. So let's take a look at Jacob's opponent here, which is playing kind of the hot deck of the tournament. This is labeled as Team of Rhinos, but this is, of course, this domain style deck where you are playing Leyline of the Guild Pack as well as Scion of Draco. BBD, I'm kind of looking at the 4-color deck. What happens if Leyline of the Guild Pack is in play with Scion? Is that just like as close to GG as it gets?
That's going to be a huge problem, and I think that is kind of going to be one of the key elements of this match, because Jacob's deck is really proficient at dealing with creatures on an individual basis, on a 1-for-1 basis.
Yeah.
But that combination of Leyline and Guild Pact and Sign of Draco to give all creatures hexproof really thwarts that. So it's going to be interesting to see whether that is just enough for Mack to roll over in this, or roll over Jacob in this match, or if Jacob is going to find some ways to have counterplay. There is Leyline Binding, there is Teferi Time Reveler that can pick up a Leyline off the table and make Scion targetable again.
Yeah, we've seen, 1-for-1 removal against decks like Boggles or something, and it doesn't work out great for the removal, I must say. So it sounds like our undefeated players here at the U.S. Regional Championship are ready to battle. So I am super pumped for this match. Let's get into this. We got Mack on the left. We got Jacob on the right. And these are our two tournament leaders. There will only be one King of the Hill after this. One perfect record going into round number 11. BBD, are you pumped?
Oh, I'm pumped. This is the first round of day 2 is such a huge round because it's so easy to like come into this round and be a little off, like you're not in the groove yet. This is your first match of Magic of the day and so on. So honestly, this is where you can get a lot of equity as a player by doing well in these first rounds of the day.
Yeah, this is always where I'm still kind of like waking up. I haven't finished my coffee yet. If we're at a pro tour, I'm about to bomb a draft and really train wreck myself for the next 3 rounds, in my element.
Same. I mean, I think historically I've been horrible first round of events. So
same.
I'm saying this from experience. This is, yeah.
Yeah, and you made it to the World Championship and even won it. So, that gives some hope to all of us other players that are not great at round number 1.
Or other rounds, too, for myself,
Oh, all right. Next level play is there. So, yeah. All right. So, from Mack here, we had land number 1. I want to say I saw a Leyline in hand. Yeah, I think that's a Leyline there. Yeah, which is strange Because I swear I saw that in the opener, and it's not in play, BBD.
Yeah, so there is a world where you have a ley line in your opener and you're choosing not to put it in play because you
Yeah.
want it as an option to pitch to something like a Force of Negation.
And I mean, there is subtlety there. So but that's wild to me. We were just talking about how good Leyline would be with Scion of Draco, but I guess only with Scion of Draco. Otherwise, it's kind of textless, right?
It's not entirely textless. It does help you cast Leyline Binding easier, but it certainly loses. Like, Scion of Draco is where it gets its power from. So if you don't have the Scion in your opening hand, and you do have things like Force of Negation or Subtlety, I do think it is reasonable to consider not putting it into play. And I think it might be matchup dependent too. I probably would have wanted to put it into play in this particular matchup because of how good Scion's hexproof ability is going to be against Jacob's deck.
Yeah, I think if I made that judgment call, especially first round in the morning, I'd be like, all right, you know what? I'm going to try to big brain this. My first draw step, it'd be Scion of Draco, like 100%.
Yeah, of course.
All right, so turn number 2 here for Jacob. Just fetching up that Steam Vent, playing a Temple Garden there. Nice dual lands, Jacob. I must say, Dad's going to be proud for sure with all these borderless cards. And here is a nice little Wrenn and 6. Now, with that subtlety and the ley line there, is this something that you ever consider casting on Wrenn, or do you just let that one go?
I think you let that one go. I don't think Wrenn is always impactful for how it helps Jacob like smooth out his draws, but I don't think that Wrenn is like a big key player in this particular matchup. I think you can get better mileage out of your subtlety than that.
Yeah, Wrenn may be not great, but what about the 6?
It's not enough. It's got to be like 7 or 8 before I'm getting. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Makes sense. So, all right, we see the Scryland here, the newest addition to these Rhinos deck, and look at that! It just drew a card. Got rid of a land. That's pretty much drawing a card, BBD.
Yeah, it's
of course, but
you know what? I'm a non-believer in the concept of surveilling away a bad card counts as drawing a card, because there is value in just having card density in your hand. But that one was so good that I'm going to give it like 75%.
Okay, not bad. All right, so we see the planes come into play here, and you got to think it's probably Rhino o'clock, huh?
It appears to be.
Okay, so Violent Outburst on the main phase here, and kind of taking a peek at Jacob's list. Open deck list, so there is no Force of Negation. There is nothing like that, but there is some cards that can interact. Do you just always main phase against this 4-color Omnath deck? What's the disadvantages of not main phasing?
I don't know that I think the major disadvantage of not main phasing is that it kind of gives Jacob perfect information. But on the other hand, Jacob does have 2 reprieves, or I believe 3 reprieves in his deck. So I like the choice of just saying, here's an opportunity and I'm going to do it.
Yeah, remand on your suspend card. Usually not great, but here's Teferi, and we might see this ley line pay off here. Wow. Mack big braining it by keeping that ley line in hand, because here is that subtlety to put Teferi either on top or bottom. And, is Teferi even good anymore? Like, it deals with one of the Rhinos, and then maybe you could have a subtlety or something, but it's definitely worse.
Yeah, I think it's contextual. Like, Teferi by itself, I don't think is going to be enough. Like, Jacob's at 14 life, about to presumably take 8 damage. So I think if you have another piece of interaction, then it's worth keeping Teferi because it's such a powerful card. But I don't think on its own it's going to be enough to give Jacob a shot here.
Yeah, and here is the benefit of an open deckless tournament. Mack knows there is 0 copies of Supreme Verdict. There's no EEs. There's nothing like that for game 1 to wrath away this board. So, you kind of take a look at that when you're about to start your match. That is the first thing you check. Be like, if I have the ability to double Rhinos, do I just go ham, or do I try to play more conservatively? And by looking at this deck list, I would be pedal to the metal.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, because of open deck lists, sometimes it's worth playing cards like that as a one of, even if it's a little suboptimal, just for reasons like this.
Now, would that change your play if you were Mack and you saw one Supreme Verdict? Would you have held this back, or like how much does these one-ofs and this style of try to make your opponent play differently based on one-ofs actually come up? Because I think this is a hot button issue amongst open decklist versus closed decklist tournaments.
Right. I mean, it could sometimes make you play worse playing around something that you're not supposed to play around. And I think in this situation, even if you knew there was Supreme Verdict, maybe even at multiple copies, you still wouldn't necessarily want to. You still would necessarily want to add more to the board there because 2 Rhinos might not be enough.
Yeah, and so BBD, you have played yourself a ton of open decklist and closed decklist tournaments. Getting ready for an open decklist tournament like this, does that affect your deck selection at all, or are you just like playing a good deck and maybe playing some one-ofs or something like that?
I don't think it's significantly affecting which deck I'm bringing to the tournament. It is affecting card choices within that deck. Even then, you don't want to go overboard with it, but you do want to make it difficult for your opponent. You don't want to just have like exclusively one thing be your sideboard answer. That's something that your opponent can play around. Having some diversity makes it harder for them.
Yeah, and Collins Mullen really took that to the next level with playing Lutri. Just play all one-ofs. Like, good luck looking over that in the 60 seconds that you have going on, huh?
Oh, that's perfection right there. I can't play around any of it. You never know what's coming.
It's utterly beautiful. So sounds like we are ready for game number 2. Let's head on down and see if Jacob can have a better chance in the post-board games. And as these players get going for Jacob's sideboard, anything you really like here?
Well, that one Supreme Verdict.
Oh yeah, baby.
I think that one's going to come in, and of course, another Chalice of the Void is big. I think that how different would that last game have been if Jacob had a Chalice?
Yeah, no kidding. The flip side, Mack's probably going to bring in some artifact removal as well. Do you think Mack took out ley lines? I didn't get a look at the hand yet, but it seems kind of rough to have him in.
I think it's interesting because the Leyline Scion thing is still incredibly powerful. So and especially with Jacob having so many copies of Chalice, I think you might even consider that Scion of Draco kind of is your major avenue in the matchup. So it is an interesting decision. I'm not entirely sure. So.
Me neither. I'd love to pick Mack's brain on that one to see what he chose to do. So all right, here is another fetch land. Going with 2 lands. Is it time? Yep, there's Renin 6 again.
I think this one's Renin 2.
Oh, yeah.
You're seeing. Yeah.
This one's Renin gone is what I've been seeing. Wow, that's an aggressive force. Like, usually you save that for Teferi, but, the flip side, Jacob could totally not have another land, and then this would just be amazing.
Right. That's a high risk, high reward type of play. I think depending on the context of Mack's hand, if he's thinking, look, my hand's not that great, this might be my better avenue to winning, is just hoping that Jacob was relying on this Ren.
Yeah, absolutely. Possibility here. So we see End Step Temple Garden, Cycle Lorien revealed, which what a cool design card with that one, huh? These basic land cyclers.
Yeah, these cards are awesome. Like they serve such a huge role because of their ability to cycle for the lands, but also their ability to just be a card of that color has proven relevant in a lot of different decks.
And of course, 5 mana Ancestral Recall. I mean, you forgot that part, BBD.
Oh, I never forget that part when I'm playing the games. Am I supposed to find a land? No, absolutely not. I'm missing my land drop, so then when I do get there, I can draw 3 cards.
Yeah, opponent's got 4 disputes in the 75. Who cares? Jam. All right, so here we go. We see the Teferi now, and that was kind of the cost, right? Is if Ren gets countered, and now there is an answer for that Leyline Binding for Teferi, like this would be huge, right? So Leyline Binding, just any way, even another Teferi would be great, right? Teferi bounce Leyline, Teferi bounce Sign of Draco, Force of Vigor, like Boseiju. There's a lot of stuff that Jacob could have here.
Yeah, this is kind of like a little bit of a house of cards for Mack right now.
Yeah. Let's See, big thinks there. I saw an engineered explosive. I saw an Omnath as far as the quick glance at the hand. We'll see if we can get a better look at those hands at some point.
This could be a nice time to just put an Omnath into play. You're not really under significant immediate pressure. And especially with an engineered explosives in hand, you're also not terribly worried about Rhinos.
Yeah, wow. But instead, Sacred Foundry tapped go. Ugh. Don't love that.
Yeah, I imagine that Jacob has something. No, it doesn't have anything. Okay. Interesting.
Are we just playing really coy here?
This feels like a probably some sort of interaction and looking to counter the crashing footfalls would be my guess.
Yeah, that could be as well. Looks like Jacob wants to ask a question away from the table. Remember, it's something you can always do if you're playing an event like this. BBD, how often do you call a judge, especially when like new cards are coming out, or are you just like, I'll figure out how it works?
I do it all the time. I mean, even things that I'm confident I know how an interaction works, I will still call a judge in that spot because I want to be positive, not just confident. And there's no drawback to doing so. You know, the judge will give you the correct information and they'll give you an extension on your match, so you're not actually losing any time either. So there's no drawback to doing so. Make sure that you know how things are going to work.
100%. And oh, look at this interaction here, BBD. Boseiju on the stack with Cascade on the stack. Now, do you ever, like I'm sure what the judge is asking for, or what we were asking for the judge for, is like timing rules here. Now, is this the only time when you can do it with Cascade on the stack? Or once you find Rhinos, like you can't Boseiju then because it's already on the stack, correct?
I mean, I believe so. I believe that you want to do this now, and I don't know that there's really a drawback to doing it earlier anyway. So, might as well get the Teferi out there, shut down the ability for Rhinos to be played.
Yeah, basically, I'm thinking, is there a way to make it so Mack has to exile one of the crashing footfalls and have it never come back, or if it is going to stay in the deck no matter what? And yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest.
I believe that once it's on the stack, Teferi can't interact with it, so I believe doing it earlier is better. But again, I'm not 100% situation where I myself would call a judge and make sure I knew the rules properly.
Yeah, no kidding. We should really have a judge here in the booth so that we could call as well and get a time extension, pause the broadcast, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I need a broadcast time extension.
All right, so looks like there it is, just put on the bottom. Players making sure they knew exactly how this interaction worked. And very interesting if Boseiju was there last turn, because it seemed very, very juicy to be able to destroy that leyline binding and then bounce Sign of Draco. As it stands now, this Sign of Draco is just going to attack this Teferi down.
Yeah. But
or is it?
Never mind. Second Boseiju. Yeah, that was a really nice sequence from Jacob. Yeah. Wanted to bait out one of the Cascade cards to nullify it with Teferi, and then additionally still has that EE for another one. So really well played to kind of slow play the interaction and make sure you get kind of the maximum amount of value you can get, and recognizing that he's taking extra damage from Scion of Draco in the process by playing it a little slower, but that ultimately shouldn't be what matters the most.
Yeah, life is a resource in the game of Magic the Gathering. That is for sure. So here we go. Leyline Binding coming down to clear up Teferi once again. And it's Violent Outburst time. Now this one, not so bad because there is that Engineered Explosive, but that's one of two cards, I think I saw Omnath a little bit earlier, so that could be an excellent follow-up if Jacob were to find something like a fetch land off the top. If you don't find a fetch land and the hand is Omnath EE, do you ever risk it here, BBD? Or is that way too greedy?
I think at 12 life, that's way too greedy.
Sure.
I think you want to play it a little bit safer in that spot, because there's also the world where Mack has something like a subtlety as well.
All right, so we just saw the hand there. It's Teferi, EE, and Omnath. So, yeah, looks like we're starting with Teferi. There was a subtlety in Mack's hand as well, but decided to not deploy that. Decides to just tick up a Teferi here. Do you like that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on if Mack has something to pitch or not. I would be tempted to play the subtlety there because subtlety loses so much value against Teferi anyway.
Oh yeah, not a chance Mack has a blue card. Otherwise, you're snapping that off, right?
Yeah, I think you almost are obligated to in that kind of a situation.
So here is this situation where right now Teferi's static ability shuts down Rhinos, right? There were 3 leyline bindings that hit Teferi's and there were 0 cards drawn. You got to look back at that and think like, wow, did I mess up from Jacob's situation, right? Like, doesn't that feel like a loss of value?
To some extent, I mean, you're going to think that maybe this Omnath is going to recoup a lot of that value, though. I mean, this is presuming that it does end up actually ever hitting the board.
Yeah, but look at this. Mack just firing on all cylinders here. Rhinos coming down, subtlety coming down. Just that Omnath, which I believe got put on top, which I mean, I for sure would do. But man, this Domain Rhinos deck is it just keeps on coming.
Yeah, and this really showcases the power of Rhinos. Like this, like so much power has been added to the board through so much interaction and at just such a little amount of cost. Yeah.
And look at that. Omnath there on the stack, dismember with the draw on the stack. So there's no life game or anything. Mack took that down in a pretty convincing fashion there, BBD, to be our tournament leader, our only player at 10-0. Wow, I'm impressed.
I'm impressed too, because we were thinking it's going to be this Leyline Scion thing that changes the matchup, and that never happened, but Rhinos still dominated both games.
Oh, it was a lot of ley lines, just a lot of ley line bindings, not necessarily ley line of the guild pack. So, we were still right. I'm gonna notch that up as a W for us. Are you cool with that?
Yeah, that's where the ambiguity of just saying the word ley line comes into play.
Exactly. So you're catching on as a caster here. You're going to be a keeper for sure. So, all right, everyone, that is going to do it here for our first main feature match. We're going to take ourselves a short little break, and then we'll be right back with a backup feature here at round number 10 at the U.S. Regional Championship. Don't go anywhere, or we'll know.
This is the Heavy Play Equipment.
All right, everybody, welcome back to coverage here of the U.S. Regional Championship. My name is Corey Ballmeister, and today we are joined by someone who once won an FNM. It's none other than Brian Braun-Duin. BBD, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and it was actually game day against Brad Nelson in 2014, not FNM.
Sorry. How could I lower your accomplishments there? That had to have been above your world championship win, right? Like
that's number one. That's BBD. Lifetime number one for me, easily.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, all right, we are going to get to our backup feature match here, and we got a couple of great records here. These players are not undefeated, but they are X-1 going into this round. So 8-1, you still got to be feeling really good, right, BBD?
Definitely. 8-1 is the spot where you're like, okay, this is going really well for me, and I could make a run if I have a nice day too.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, let's check out our first deck list here, and this is going to be Emmett here playing Golgari Yawgmoth. BBD, tell us a little bit about how Yawgmoth works for anybody who has not really seen this deck in action. Maybe they're just joining us right now for the broadcast.
Yeah, so this is a creature engine combo deck built around Yawgmoth Thran Physician. And the way that it works is Yawgmoth allows you to sacrifice a creature to put a -1/-1 counter on a different creature and draw a card from it. And this deck is built around having a lot of creatures to sacrifice to Yawgmoth, including undying creatures like Yawgmoth, where you can actually remove the +1/+1 counter using Yawgmoth, which lets you sacrifice a Yawgmoth again, bringing it back, and rinse and repeat that. So the basic combo is Yawgmoth with Yawgmoths to reset their counters, and then use something like a Blood Artist or a Zulaport Cutthroat to drain out your opponent as you're doing it.
Sounds great. Yeah, Zulaport Cutthroat, the chosen card in this list instead of Blood Artist, it looks like. And, that's just a nod to the One Ring, being able to combo through that card is still definitely very important. So let's take a flip side at Emmett's opponent here. And ooh, this is a spicy one. Chris Danis here is playing mono black Coffers BBD. This is one of my favorite decks of all time.
This is an absolute like awesome deck, kind of like what we were saying with the like mono white soul or Martyr of Sands deck. This is kind of the like alter ego of that deck, where it's also this kind of big mana control deck, and it's kind of attacking the metagame from a different angle. So really, this deck is just this big deck based around Karn the Great Creator, allowing you to have access to a toolbox of answers for whatever your opponent's doing.
You heard it here first. Mono black Coffers is the evil twin of Martyr Sand. So yeah, I like it. And I'm here for it. The one thing I want to see is 3 Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, which I think is just outlandish in any other deck, but it combos with Cabal Coffers so well that ends up being extremely powerful. So, all right, it sounds like these players are ready. So we are going to jump on in here for round number 10. With these players both at 7-1-1-1. Too many ones. 7-1-1. These players did pick up a draw, BBD. They're not exactly 8-1.
Still only once defeated, though. Still counts. Yeah.
Now, it's a little tough for the math right now, BBD, but, in your experience, these kind of tournaments, is it usually X1-1 or X2-1 that makes it into the top 8 of these? I'm usually, like at Texas Roadhouse or something by now being eliminated, so usually still not in this tournament this late into it.
Yeah, it really depends. A lot of times what happens with a draw is there will be some people who make the top 8 with a draw and others who can't, and it comes down to tiebreakers. So yeah, it's really difficult to know. In a lot of cases, a draw basically is a loss, but that's not always the case.
Okay, cool. So this loss might have not been too terrible as long as they made it to day 2. If you get a draw round 2, it feels like a loss, that's for sure. But if you get a draw, when you're already 7-0, it's like, well, this draw might not be as bad as a loss here. So we see Inquisition on turn 1, one of the more powerful plays from this mono black Coffers list, decides to take Agatha's Soul Cauldron instead of Delighted Halfling. And yeah, that probably means this Delighted Halfling is not long for the world, but looks like it did live here, BBD.
Yeah, it did. And I think Chris is, deciding that Soul Cauldron is going to be a big problem throughout the game. Whereas Delighted Halfling, yes, it's going to help Emmett curve out a little bit better, but that's something that's going to be less relevant as the game progresses.
Yep, totally agree. Then we do see Field of Ruin as the second land played for Chris. If you're sitting across from Chris and you don't have any information on the hand, does that tell you anything as a land drop, or from this deck, is it not really a sign?
I think you could interpret it as a sign that, maybe like the mana's not great right here, but there is that expedition map in play. So I don't think it's going to be like significantly informing how you decide to play the game yourself.
Okay, fair enough. I did take a quick peek at the hand, and it didn't look like I saw any lands. I saw the One Ring. I think I saw a Karn back there, and some other stuff. So maybe a little land light here from Chris, but if Chris is able to just play this Urborg now and top deck something like Cabal Coffers, then all of a sudden you get to skip having 4 mana and jump straight to 5. And then it just scales up from there, right? Like, how does the math work on Cabal Coffers? Is it every land is 2, or?
Oh man, you're asking me questions that are difficult to answer here.
I'm really testing you here in the morning. I know on the West Coast, it's a little early for you, so I'm really trying to put you to the test, BB.
You didn't waste any time trying to hit me with math. That's brutal.
All right, so here we go from Emmett. We see a Boseiju coming down. That is a Eldritch Evolution and a Shieldred, I believe, as the 2 cards, and pretty powerful at this point. We are going to play a Shieldred, and this is a pretty juicy board. I do see 1 Damnation, but it is just a 1-of. Do you think this is kind of like what we saw in the last round, since we didn't see any Supreme Verdicts for game 1? You just jam, but now Emmett has seen that there is 1 Wrath effect, but you still just jam because it's only 1?
Yeah, and you also have to ask yourself the question, like, if I hold back and get wrathed, am I going to win anyway? And oftentimes the answer is no. So
Yeah.
in situations like that, it's like, look, I'm probably going to lose if Damnation happens by putting so much pressure on the board already, but I'm going to probably lose to Damnation if Damnation happens anyway. So.
Yeah. No, that is some great advice. That's usually how I look at it. I think that was my biggest level up moment as a player. And it was just, you can't play around everything. And when there's something that is just going to completely wreck you, you just get to ignore that from your brain because, well, that's going to win anyways. So in my mind, I just think, well, they can't have that because if they have that, I'm dead. So I no longer play around it. That was my first big level up moment as a player, I think.
Yeah, I agree. That was a huge level up moment for me too. And then the counterpart to that is you get that idea like, okay, I can't beat this card. I'm not going to play around it. But sometimes conditions change in the game, and suddenly you are able to play around it in a later spot. So you want to always be reassessing as well.
Yeah, not me. Not me. I'm just if I'm gonna not play around it once, that's it for the game. Might even be for the match. You know, I just might be over it.
Yeah, when I said you, I meant colloquially. I didn't mean specifically you, Corey. I know you're not going to play around it.
Okay, good. Thank you for clarifying. So here we go. We see a fresh, juicy grist off the top of the library here. Anytime we've seen that card drawn, you know, it's just looked absolutely impressive. It's just really looked impressive all weekend. That card has been very much impressing me. Maybe the card of the weekend so far, since Yawgmoth is the deck that seems like it's performing the best in this RC.
Yeah, and like Grist isn't really like part of the Yawgmoth combo, but I do think it is, besides Yawgmoth, probably the most important card. One
So
thing I want
BBD, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say one thing I want to point out is I really liked the decision of Emmett to hold the Seiju that's in his hand, because that is one way that you can shut down an Urborg Coffers mana engine, is using a Beseiju. So I think that is a good decision to keep that. You don't need the extra land drop right now, but you want that versatility.
Yeah, good assessment there for sure. I was kind of curious why we were holding that, but that makes a lot of sense if there ever is a Cabal Coffers. And one thing that I noticed there from Chris is, Karn the Great Creator, pretty powerful card. How do you feel about having 3 of them in this board state right now, BBD?
What do you mean by 3 of them?
There is 3 Karns in hand there if you look at our right side of the
Oh,
screen.
wow.
Yeah. That's not great.
No, that's not where you want to be. Granted, with that being said, the One Ring can possibly help Chris pull out of this situation by drawing a bunch of cards. On the other hand, one element that Emmett has in his deck list is he's playing Zulaport Cutthroat instead of Blood Artist, which I think generally Blood Artist is the more commonly played card. But the beauty of Cutthroat is that it lets you combo through a One Ring. So,
yep, totally agree. I think that is going to be helpful. And I was also thinking this Orcish Bowmaster is really strong against the One Ring right now, as it's just going to create an extremely fast clock. But getting Yawgmoth in play, I think, is just way too powerful right now. But gotta be tempting to keep that Orcish Bowmaster around. You gotta love the Lord of the Rings set kind of tension point here between the One Ring being such an incredibly powerful card, and then Orcish Bowmaster being such an incredibly powerful card, but Orcish Bowmaster is very good against the One Ring.
yeah, but it's a little bit of a flavor fail because they're on the same side in the actual Lord of the Rings. I don't know.
Yeah, good
This
point.
this
good
is
point.
ruining my Lord of the Rings fandom immersion. So,
and we know one thing about you is you are a huge Magic lore person, right?
I used to be. I've relapsed or lapsed a bit in that. So,
Okay, fair enough. All right, so there is oh yeah, they'll be like, "Yep, you take 1 for that." Be like, "No, I do not. I have swamps." So, here's Zulaport Cutthroat, and in this battlefield, if Emmett is not going to sack any plants, not going to sack any insects, anything like that, you got to think a little bit of maybe Orcish Bowmaster would have been better on this battlefield.
yeah, I mean it's possible. Although, this is a situation because Cutthroat can combo through One Ring.
Mhm.
This is a situation where it is getting a little dangerous for Chris.
Yeah, definitely. But as it stands here, with only 2 green creatures, you're not drawing to a lot, right? Since you already played your land drop, you can't Court of Calling. So, like, your turn is done now, right? I think most Yawgmoth players stop right here. And now I guess the flip side is, yeah, Emmett would have dealt 2 extra damage to Chris. That's not that big of
Yeah, but I think the big thing to note though is
a deal. Ooh,
that
there's Coffers.
oftentimes maybe a second One Ring would be a nice follow up play from Chris, and that's no longer like a super appealing option anymore.
Okay, BBD, so walk me through what our possibilities are for Car now. It looks like my math is correct. We have 5 off the Coffers, then 6, 7. So we have 7 mana available. What kind of toolbox cards here do we have that would be a juicy for this scenario?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of options. I think one possible option here. It's not like the most awesome option from a normal standpoint, but it is to get something like an Engineer Explosives for 0 and just at least clear the tokens off the board.
Okay.
Granted, you're still going to be at huge risk on the next turn, but
Yeah, I suppose we got that. I mean, Hearst doesn't look very good. Tithing Blade looks pretty bad at an Edict. Pithing Needle for Yawg is kind of interesting.
it is interesting. You are at risk of just getting beat down on board, though.
Yeah.
And if I don't know what that Grist is at either, but that's getting close to ultimate range.
Yeah,
which,
I want to say that was in play for 2 turns already, so it should be at what, 5? Starts at 3.
yeah, so
Yeah,
that's
so
that's
that's
getting
ultimate.
close to the point where that's added damage as well. It's adding up for sure.
Yeah, holy cow, this is looking quite bad. And there's, of course, everybody's favorite card, and a card I know you have cast many, many times, BBD, is Snaring Bridge. Everybody's favorite Magic card to play against.
Oh, it's very fun to play against, not very fun to play with. That's what I've heard.
I think, isn't it the other way around?
Yeah, it's the other way around. Yeah.
Oh god. Yeah, usually you're pairing it with Lantern of Insights and all those disgusting Lantern cards, huh?
Yeah, I'm dreaming of a day where Lantern's back again.
You know what? So are 6 to 7 or 8 people here on the world. All right, so there we go. We have the Fatal Push that deals with the Zulapod Cutthroat, and now, we just have Yawgmoth. Here is Shieldred's Edict to deal with Grist, and here's Bitter Triumph to discard one of these extra cards to clear the board. We don't have Damnation, but that was Damnation at home for sure.
Yeah, that was build your own damnation, and honestly, pretty impactful. Like I'm not sure that it was correct for Emmett to sacrifice the entire board there. I think
Yeah.
leaving a couple creatures behind might have been nice. You don't get to draw the cards, but Chris has this ring at 2 counters, is at 6 life. Even just being able to, I know it's a little old fashioned, but attack and block with creatures.
Oh, attacking and blocking?
Yeah,
That's so
it
boring.
has some relevance there.
Yeah, I would have to agree. When that Fatal Push got pointed at Zulapod Cutthroat, of course, we have perfect information. We know kind of what was going on in Chris's hand, but you'd like to think or be curious to think what the game would look like if you just let that go to the graveyard, right? Sack the Cutthroat itself to draw a card. I suppose that would be the one play, but like now Emmett has a ton of cards and is going to be able to deploy some creatures, stuff like that, but every land Chris gets is going to be multiplied thanks to this Cabal Coffers and Urborg plan. We'll see if the Boseiju from Emmett is going to be fired off on Cabal Coffers, as that's getting to be a bit scary as well.
I think what we're looking at here is Emmett is thinking when Chris goes to draw 3 cards from the One Ring, I'm going to Court of Calling for 2. And get an Orcish Bowmaster. And I think Chris is got to be alarm bells are going off. Your opponent just drew a bunch of cards and passed the turn.
Yeah. This is the classic, with a deck you might be familiar with, like a Bant Company style deck, when you just, God, 4th land, I'm so unlucky, pass to you. I guess
just flooding out so hard, don't have anything to do.
Shoot. Yeah, I think that's that exact scenario. And here we go. Chris is sensing this out a bit, but here is a Thoughtseize and not a lot of life to play with here.
Yeah, not at all. Actually, it's just going to be a Bowmaster itself
Is
without
there
having
a
to core
cord
for it.
as well, though? Because you can still do that as well, right?
And yeah, we'll see how that if there's a cord as well, because that also I think would
Well, there's just another Orcish Bowmaster there.
and I think that might be game over. That's 2 life from Thoughtseize. Chris
Yeah.
looks like he's at 3 life right here.
I think you are right. Yeah, that Thoughtseiz's damage got taken immediately. That's why it was put down, but the spell hasn't resolved yet. So this other trigger from Orcish Bowmaster is going to put Chris down to 2, and then Emmett's going to be like, yep, here's my hand. It'll be the last hand you look at this game.
The key thing is you do still get to look at the hand and take a card from it.
Yes.
You're down but not out.
Oh,
or you're out but not down, rather.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for clarifying that. Because I definitely, if I'm about to lose the game and I do have a Thoughtseize, I'm at 1. It doesn't matter. I still always fire it off for extra information. Now, in an open decklist tournament, a little less valuable, but still a thing. Now, that being said, there is a Cling to Dust in the graveyard. So
Okay.
we can hit a creature to gain life.
Yeah, that is relevant. Now, that will consume quite a lot of the mana
Yeah,
that
we'll be
Chris
down
has
to
available, even with
4,
Coffers,
right?
yeah.
So you have to cling to not just die on the spot. And then, I mean, for 4 mana, you got to have one of 2 cards, right? You got to have a second the One Ring, or you got to have Damnation.
So I think, okay, so Chris is at 3 life right now. Cling to Dust going to put him up to 6 life. That Thoughtseize means 4 life. I think one thing that you might consider is drawing cards off this One Ring with that Orcish Bowmaster still on the stack.
Okay.
And hoping to draw an answer, because I don't think these Karns are going to get the job done.
Yeah, the Karns are definitely not going to do it, as this battlefield will just attack you again. But yeah, if you draw now, you draw 3 cards, you take 3. Thoughtseize will put you to 1. But if you have,
I think that might still be lethal then, yeah.
okay, so there is 3 damage, gonna make a 4/4 amass token. And
there's a second copy of Cling to Dust, though.
Okay.
Could draw that for possible.
Yeah, but then you only have 3 mana available, and then this attack is just going to get you no matter what. So I do not see a way out of this here for Chris.
Yeah, I don't either.
That was a sweet game, though.
Yeah, that was a sweet game, and there was a lot of like back and forth, a lot of fight from both players to navigate that.
So BBD, I was really, mean to you earlier in this match, trying to test you with your math and stuff like that. So I'm gonna give you a much easier question now. How does this mono black Coffers deck sideboard against this Yawgmoth deck?
You know what? Probably not much. When your entire sideboard is artifacts for Karn, there's not a lot there.
Yeah, exactly. We just see this deck doesn't really sideboard much at all. In a lot of matchups, sometimes you'll see people, change the numbers a little bit. If Thoughtseizes are really bad, like against Burn or something like that, maybe you want to bring in like the One Ring or something. And then you can kind of look at the cards that there's more than one of. And that screams to me that, yeah, these cards actually come in from time to time. And it's the Chalice of the Voids and the Engineered Explosives. But that also just screams to me Rhinos. So I would imagine this is pretty much a send the deck back, no changes. And that's also got to just be nice when you're playing in this long of a tournament. I've played Mono Green Devotion in Pioneer a ton, and that was probably my favorite thing is just, well, I don't have to think during sideboarding while my opponent is racking their brain trying to get the perfect configuration for game number 2.
Yeah, I mean, you have to do so much thinking to calculate the math of how much mana you get that save yourself the brain power.
Yeah, exactly. You're already doing calculus. You don't want to be doing any more here. So, Thoughtseize on turn 1. BBD, what are you taking?
Well, it looks like Emmett does not have a black source, if I'm not mistaken.
Just hoping for the Ulamog or the Urborg.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't hate that. I don't hate that because it's a fine hand otherwise. So it's not a horrible like train of logic.
And I do think, this is a 6 Thoughtseize deck where there's 4 Thoughtseizes, 2 Inquisition. I kind of play with the same train of thought that I do when I'm playing against Rakdos Evoke, where this is going to be kind of funny coming from me, is I like to just keep pretty much any hand against a deck that can really Thoughtseize and rip apart your hand. But, then again, BBD, you know me, I just like to keep hands.
Yeah, there's a old adage, always keep 7.
Yeah. If me and our mutual testing partner Seth Manfield, we definitely go by the same train of thought there. Like, just keep 7. 7 is more than 6.
Yeah, that is some math that I am willing to do early in the morning.
Okay. All right. So there is the Colony Garden to bring in a plant. There was the option to play a Wall of Roots there. Were you tempted at all to do that or not?
I kind of like the decision to just do this. I think putting the annoying tap land into play earlier is probably a little bit better.
Yeah, and it is Boseiju as the other land that Emmett would have to play, so a little bit brutal, keeping Emmett's options open. And you saw Chris kind of fanned over the Urborg and was like, well, all right, maybe not yet.
Yeah, that's a great decision to get a swamp instead, recognizing that Emmett does not have a black source.
Now I can't wait till Chris goes, all right, land, Field of Ruin, your Colony Garden, and be like, oh, wait.
And it looks like a change in decision.
Okay. Now are we getting Urborg? Ooh, Castle. Yeah. When you can get any land, might as well get a better swamp here. A swamp with some extra text here. As that really can come up in this mono black Coffers deck more than anything. It is a 1 of or a 2 of, usually played in Rakdos Evoke as well. But that doesn't happen that often. But with this deck that is using its resources so fast, it's kind of ramping out. It's kind of like mono black Tron in a sense. That you actually can use that castle sometimes.
Yeah, it is a very relevant upgrade over actual swamp.
Yep. All right, so heading over to Emmett. Didn't attack with the plant. Don't love that. But Yawgmoth getting in there. And there's the black source.
Yep, that's a crucial draw right there.
Yeah, that is big. And we'll see what the follow-up is.
Probably, I think there was a Grist, if I'm not mistaken, which I think would be kind of one of the optimal plays you could just make on this board as well.
Yeah, Grist is really tough. I mean, we saw the Shieldred's Edict, which was a clean answer for it. There's also 1 of Bitter Triumph. And now that I'm looking at it, the Shieldred's Edict is also a 1 of. So, yeah, I mean, Planeswalkers are not easy for this mono black Coffers deck to deal with.
And, I mean, crucially, and this is just a thing about Planeswalkers in general, it's like, even if your opponent does answer Grist, it's at a disadvantage to them.
How so?
Well, you've already activated Grist before they've answered it. And hey, there you go.
Air horn sounds as we did it. Oh man, I had a hilarious moment. I was at a tournament where I was playing an elemental deck up against Yawgmoth, and my opponent, I was in the finals of this tournament, right? And my opponent Grist ticks up and hits the extra insect. It was huge because I had Fury as well to deal with it, so it went straight to 5. And my opponent's friends were just losing it in the background, like, yes, this is amazing. And they're like high-fiving and stuff. And it's just like, yeah, this never happens. And I literally heard that player do the exact same thing in the top 4 the round before. So,
awesome.
I'm just never lucky. It was absolutely hilarious.
That's my favorite part, is like the people in the background cheering on crazy stuff that happens. That's the best part of all this stuff.
Yeah, and then I lost, and they lifted my opponent and the chair and everything, like hoisted him in the air. It was actually awesome. I'm glad I lost that one.
I'm glad you lost too, Corey.
Thank you, BBD. I appreciate that. So getting back in the game here, we have the 1 ring that came down for Chris, drew a card, and then back to Emmett, where we ticked up that Grist to get 1 more insect. Didn't hit again there. How unlucky. Then plays Boseiju, and I at least saw 1 Orcish Bowmaster as a way to do some damage against this 1 ring. But outside of that, maybe not a ton going on.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of generic pressure. I mean, this is one element of the Yawgmoth deck that I think is part of why it's so good is it just assembles these like truly garbage boards like this, but the damage from this adds up.
Totally
But
agree.
Bowmasters in response is a really nice way to counteract that. So Chris is not going to, suffer the slings and arrows of the Bowmaster.
Yeah, Bowmaster ends up being like a great card in Modern, but as Bowmaster's dominance kind of reigns true, and we see decks like Team of Rhinos become popular where Bowmaster is actually pretty bad against it, it sometimes looks like Bowmasters are only in decks to deal with other Bowmasters because they've forced out all the X1s.
Exactly. It's the only way to fight, a bad guy with a Bowmaster is a good guy with a Bowmaster. Is that right?
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that analogy for sure. So we see the Bowmaster cleaning up Emmett's Bowmaster so that when Chris drew 2 cards, it was not extra painful. But what is still very painful is that Grist at 6, 3 plants. We see some other action in hand. It looks like Emmett is down to 1 card in hand after this Thoughtseize gets fired off. And, with a 1 ring at 2 and Chris still at a very healthy life total, are you even that worried about this Thoughtseize?
I mean, it depends on who should be worried about this Thoughtseize. I do actually think that there is pretty relevant pressure on Chris here because, yeah, it's mostly 1/1s on the other side of the board, but it does quickly add up, especially with that Grist. So I think this is, yeah.
This is one of my favorite cards as well here. We see an Emrakul, the Promised End. I think I remember one of my favorite moments of Pro Tour testing when we were on a testing team together is someone played an Emrakul and be like, okay, now how is the worst way I can play this team? And I think it was Martin Mueller walked by and just play like BBD would play normally and then just walked into the other room. I'm like, whoa.
That's a good decision. I hope if Chris manages to play this Emrakul this game, he does not play it the way that I would normally play.
Yeah, sorry, BBD. You had to get in that classic dagger here from
that's
Genesis.
just a good classic dagger right there. You have to get that in.
So what do you take here?
Well,
that's a good hand.
Yeah, Shieldred. It looks like Shieldred was taken.
Okay.
Which I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly everything that was in Chris's hand, but Shieldred does die to the Grist. But barring that scenario, Shieldred would completely dominate this game. So maybe like a playing around the worst case scenario there.
I mean, no matter what, I'm just happy, and I think all the audience watching this show as well is just happy that Emrakul didn't get taken because there is something special about Emrakul hitting the battlefield. And, this used to be an absolute dominant card in Standard, Pioneer, and stuff like that, but hasn't made a huge splash in Modern, but it can still absolutely devastate a board when you can control your opponent's turn.
Yeah, and it was kind of the big bad guy of that Standard format, but now in Modern, it's kind of almost like you love it. Yeah, it's the hero. You love to see it.
Yeah, I never thought old Emrakul would be the hero here of the story, but here we are. All right, another token comes up. Grist is at 7. At what point do you consider trying to ultimate, just in case you run into something like a Shieldred's Edict or Bitter Triumph or anything like that? Is it only when it's just lethal?
I don't think it's only when it's lethal, but I do think it is going to be in a scenario. It doesn't have to be lethal to be a valuable play. Again, there are so many, small creatures that can plink away for minor amounts of damage that it does add up, even if it's not in itself a game-winning play.
Okay, cool. So here we go. Emmett with 1 card in hand goes to fetch, and this just screams Orcish Bowmaster number 2 here, if I've ever seen it, to be able to trade with that army and then maybe deal with one of the Orcish Bowmasters on the other side. And if it is indeed that, I mean, this is okay for Emmett, but you would think still pretty big advantage to Chris here.
I think it's close. Like Chris doesn't have the mana engine online. And I think if this is a Bowmaster, that actually, I would say, swings things pretty well for Emmett, because now this combat trade is actually a good or a profitable trade for Emmett.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still a lot of damage looming in from, the One Ring, especially with a Bowmaster on the other side of the board.
Yeah, and we did see 2 copies of March of the Wretched Sorrow to be able to gain some life, but we got to go back to that play with the cracking of the map when Emmett did not have a black source. Now we're 2 pieces away from the combo, the quote-unquote combo of Urborg and Cabal Coffers to be able to really do some really powerful things. So, in some regards, now that Emmett already has enough black mana, it almost backfired for Chris to be playing around that.
It did. I think that was a clear situation of, right decision, bad result. You got punished for doing the right thing. And I think a lot of times it's easy to look back at a match afterwards and second guess a choice like that and think, wow, if I had just done this, I maybe I would have won. But you have to consider it in the context of what things look like at the time.
Okay, I totally agree. So there is 2 expedition maps, that one of Bitter Triumph, which can deal with Grist pretty handily. And I think you pretty much have to. And then, of course, we can start doing this Emrakul math here. So unfortunate for Chris that the only planeswalker that gets dealt with does count as a creature in the yard, right? That doesn't count with an extra type at all.
It is a creature anywhere not on the battlefield, sure.
So yeah, we see artifact, instant, sorcery, creature, land. 5 types, I think, would be the only thing that would make sense so far. So that's 8 mana. Still a ways off here from the promised end, it would seem.
Yeah, I think we're a little bit off from the promised end. With that being said, we do have double expedition map, which is going to produce the 2 lands needed to execute this combo, but it's going to take some time.
I don't love this, BBD.
Yeah, I don't love it either. I think at 10 life and the pressure in play with the Grist, the pressure with your own One Ring, that it is dangerous to kind of go big here. I think you might. Yeah, I don't know.
This was just all setup stuff. I mean, you could have just went map, Bitter Triumph, Grist, discard a card so you don't lose any life. Or better yet, play 1 map, leave 1 swamp open. So just in case things get dicey, you can exile a couple cards with March of the Wretched Sorrow and, even -2 something, gain 2 with Grist not being in the battlefield as well. Like, I haven't done the math. I don't see exactly how many creatures right now. I seriously think Chris could be dead on board.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it is very possible that is the case. And I think that's kind of the big thing too, though, about Chris's play is that March of Wretched Sorrow gets so much better if you do have these lands. And I think it's reasonable to think that Chris was thinking, I'm not getting anywhere by making these kind of treading water plays. Yeah. So I need to instead, go for this huge mana, huge March of Wretched Sorrow, get myself back in the gameplay. And I think that makes sense. But whether he will actually survive this specific turn remains to be seen.
Yeah, so here we go. We're going to finally see this Yawgmoth with Yawgmoth, the kind of new Splinter Twin scenario here in Modern. That's going to really pop off. So first, what we're going to be seeing is Yawgmoth get sacrificed, getting rid of this Bowmaster. So, there's going to be that first trigger that is going to happen. But now Yawgmoth will come back with the Undying trigger. But now every insect that you sack, you're going to then target your Yawgmoth to get rid of that counter, draw a card. Now sack Yawgmoth, put no counters on nothing. And then so you get to draw 2 cards per every insect. And here we go. Emmett's explaining that I'm going to get Zulapult Cutthroat. I'm going to sack this. There's enough triggers on the stack that you're not only going to die to the ring, but you're going to just die this turn with this combination. Really only needed either a Yawgmoth or a Quarter Calling to get this done here. And yeah, this looks like GG, BBD.
Yeah, I think so. It's going to, yeah, this looks like this is going to be enough triggers in addition with the One Ring. Chris does have that March in hand, so if it's only enough and relies on the one ring, then okay, it looks like it is enough. I think Emmett was also pointing to the Grist ultimate as being the remaining damage needed.
Yeah. It looked like, you get one drain from the first Yawgmoth, then the insect, second drain to the Yawgmoth, then Yawgmoth is 3. So each insect is 2 drains. And then on top of that, after you've sacked every creature, Grist is going to be like a lava axe, something like that to finish it off. So is that matchup play out kind of like you think? Do you think that's a bad matchup for the Coffers stack, or maybe a slight misstep there at the end, not being a little bit more reactive?
No, I think that is kind of how I would expect a matchup like that to play out. I think the Yawgmoth deck tends to be good in those kinds of matchups just because of how much advantage and the different ways it can produce advantage. That makes it really difficult for an answer deck to have the right answers.
Yeah, totally agree. So we are going to be wrapping up this round here, but first we got ourselves a little giveaway here thanks to our sponsor of the broadcast here. This is Heavy Play. If you want to try to get some store credit here to get your first purchase going, you can type Heavy Play in the chat. Yeah, BBD, even you, if you really want to try to get some store credit here, we'll allow you to enter. We probably won't allow you to win though, okay?
That sounds like most tournaments I play.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So type Heavy Play in the chat for your chance to win $5 in store credit at heavyplay.com. And remember, if you want to pair that with your $5 off, you can use that promo code as well to get yourself 10% off. So that is going to do it here from round number 10. We're going to take ourselves a short little break, but when we come back, round number 11, and things are really starting to heat up as these players are starting to be playing for and see these Pro Tour invitations on the line really becoming true. So we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.